that you would change the Russia deadline to 10 to 12 days. Has that started yet, or when can we, see the official statement that is the new deadline?
I'll tell you what, I'll give it to you now. Do you want a big scoop?
Yes, please.
Everybody else, close your ears, okay? You ready?
I'm ready.
10 days from today.
President Trump has turned around to Russia and effectively said the 50 days that he's given Vladimir Putin to come to the peace table and to stop the fight in Ukraine is reducing to 10 days. This is a move he made after discussions with Keir Starmer in Scotland, and is Donald Trump, I think, flexing his frustration at Vladimir Putin and his increasing understanding that Vladimir Putin is not necessarily going for some form of peace settlement and is continuing to attack civilian targets across Ukraine.
And then, we're going to put on tariffs and stuff, and I don't know if it's going to affect Russia, because he wants to obviously probably keep the war going. But we're going to put on tariffs and the various things that you put on. It may or may not affect them, but it could.
Medvedev's response to this has been the typical Russian playbook to any time something comes in to try and threaten. They either threaten back or they belittle back. So he's tried to belittle Donald Trump, knowing how well that will irk Donald Trump. So they're playing the man. And what he's tried to suggest is that Trump is behaving like Biden, which, they've done the research, they know what will insult him more than anything else. And accusing him of being like Joe Biden is something that will really get to Donald Trump.
Stopped 6 wars in the last, I'm averaging about a war a month, but the last 3 were very close together.
I think in the early days, the Austrian foreign minister's reading of what was being offered to Putin is just right. Putin was being given everything that he's asking for now and almost more. And it's interesting, President Zelensky of Ukraine had recognized that he can't take Crimea and the disputed Donbass region areas that have been captured by Russia back militarily, and had already said that he'd take them back diplomatically. So he'd already presented that as a plan to Donald Trump. Donald Trump seems to have gone one step further and said to the Russians, you can have all of it. This is where I think Vladimir Putin has made a strategic mistake, because he should have taken that as the offer on the table. And the fact that he hasn't, to Donald Trump, who's all about doing deals, he's given Putin a deal which gives Putin everything he's asking for today, and Putin is still refusing it. So that'll have irked Trump. Both Russia and Ukraine are not even on the same piece of paper, and therefore there isn't a detail to say whether it can be implemented on the ground or not, because we don't know what it is that would be implemented. If I was to speculate, I'd say in the future what there might be is some form of demilitarized zone, like we have again in the Korean Peninsula, where there isn't a formal end to the conflict, but there is this long-term agreement in place that stops the two sides fighting. That's a very untidy solution, but I think it's the only way that will at least get both sides onto a piece of paper. But we're nowhere near there yet, because Putin still thinks he can win. I think what we're doing is we're potentially heading for, and I'll caveat this with, it's Donald Trump's decision-making. Who knows what he's going to do tomorrow? He's known for changing his mind and softening his stance on things. But I think we're definitely heading for a more guaranteed level of support from the United States to Ukraine, and for the United States supporting European countries and other countries giving equipment, American equipment, into Ukraine. Because of course, if different countries own American equipment, America still has to give permission for that to be transferred to Ukraine and to be used. So that's really important indeed. And we've seen that already with the movement of Patriot air defense missile systems from Germany into Ukraine, and US former M1 Abrams tanks from Australia to Ukraine. So that permission's still there. That's critical. Whether we'll see Donald Trump going one step further and authorizing the Ukrainians to use American long-range weapons against targets inside Russia, or giving them even greater wherewithal, we wait to see if that happens. Putin's not looking for an exit ramp at the moment. He wants to try and keep Donald Trump on side for as long as possible. But I think from a long-term perspective, he doesn't care. He thinks he can win in the ground. That's what his advisors are telling him. They're not giving him the ground truth. And he thinks that by elongating everything long enough, he knows Donald Trump's only going to be in for another 4 years. If Putin can elongate this beyond 4 years, it then becomes something that's in the next presidential election campaign. He can influence a new president. He wants to go for Ukraine fatigue on the geopolitical stage. He's achieving that in some areas, and that's why he'll play the long game. Putin thinks in generations. We think in presidential or prime ministerial timeframes, or more accurately, what tomorrow morning's headlines are going to be. If Donald Trump sticks to his deadline, and I'm using "if," the biggest word in the English language, because I think something may change. The US has got quite a bit of leverage to come in and implement it. If they supported the reduction of the price that's paid on the international market for Russian oil, that would have a massive impact on the Russian economy. If he brought in tariffs against China and India and tried to split them away from the support that they're giving Russia, that would have a massive impact on the Russian economy and Russia's ability to continue to prosecute the conflict. I think the European leaders, especially those European countries that are within NATO, it's the relationship with the United States is having an interesting effect. It's brought them together closer and faster than anything else has ever happened. Europe, for too many years, has relied on the United States, and it's been the automatic assumption if all things go wrong, the United States are going to come to help us. Donald Trump has changed that, and we're seeing Europe working together, which is why we're seeing much more coming out of Francois Macron, the German Chancellor Merz, and Keir Starmer, all working together as that threesome. There are, within the EU element of Europe, a few dissenters, as we see with Viktor Orban of Hungary and others, that are effectively stopping the European Union working together to support Ukraine in the timely manner that you need to, but working outside that with this coalition of the willing, underpinned by a coalition of the willing through European elements of NATO, that's working quite strongly. And I think that because that's coming together much more strongly, Donald Trump recognizes it. He sees the EU, he sees that European power bloc, he sees that coalition of the willing power bloc as something that could have an economic influence on the United States and an economic opportunity. So this is why Trump lauds the deal that he did to get the EU countries to pay for US weapons to supply to Ukraine as a deal tick. And therefore, I think we've got Europe in a way that they haven't really done beforehand, coming together to play not just the threat from Russia and deal with that, but to play Donald Trump at his own game and get him supporting what it is that they. The single biggest risk or blind spot as we're reading this, I think the thing that we have to be cognizant of that people aren't doing at the minute is the interrelationship between all of the conflicts that are going on around the world. The biggest winner out of what happened on the 7th of October when Hamas attacked into Israel was Vladimir Putin, because it took Putin away from being number one on the international press, and he stayed off being number one in the international press. And therefore, as that continues, Putin is winning from that perspective. And therefore, we look at what is going on inside Iran, Russia, and we look at the Chinese comments on the Russia-Ukraine war, where Chinese government officials have turned around and said, we can't let Russia lose, because America would then focus its total effort into what we're doing down in Southeast Asia. They're all interrelated, and we need to start recognizing that, and we need to look from an international community perspective as to ways of making sure that those, whilst they're interrelated, don't start to join up more, that we can keep them apart and deal with them that way. That's the biggest threat.